Hey, what's going on? This is some random Irish guy, and this video that I'm making coming up to Christmas time is a big shout out to one of my favourite subscribers. This is a big shout out to a channel user called fgv112. His videos are really amazing. I mean, this guy gets a lot of stuff. His collection is just astounding. My personal favourite is this one here, my GameBoy Collection 2011. So I thought, what the hell, he's made a video about his Game Boy collection, I'll make a video about my Game Boy collection. Now, I'm not trying to one-up the guy, I respect him too much, I would not do that. So this is going to be my personal Game Boy collection. Cue the music! Okay, first on the chopping board, we all know this, the original Game Boy. Now, this took me a long time to get. Amazingly enough, these things are pretty rare, especially where I live. Now, of course, eBay will have their fair share of different colours and style, and you know, you might even get a refurbished one, but I wanted the original crisp, clear one, and I wanted to see that pretty little dot matrix with stereo sound. And yet, it still works. I'm going to take my favourite game, Blow. And yet this thing still works, which I love really. You love that old ding. Oh, no, you get the dust at the end. Remember that, the contrast thing, you have to work on the contrast? It still works. I'm not going to go into that because I haven't got time. But yeah, the game still works. I was playing it there literally no minute before I came on with this video. The biggest annoyance about this is the batteries. The batteries get, they just get downed in like a matter of seconds. I mean, it was the first attempt at Nintendo to make a portable console. It worked great. The success of this thing was amazing. But there was a few flops. I mean, for one, you could barely see jack shit on the screen unless you got it under the light or contrast. You know, the stereo sound is actually rather good. I will give it that. It had a cool headphone jack. You know, there was a power adapter. You could hook it up to a DC if you ran out of batteries. An expansion port, so you could play 2 players. And a contrast, which would adjust the screen. But the big killer was the batteries, but you know, it was the first attempt, so you couldn't expect much. So anyway, that was the original Game Boy Pocket. Now, this itself is cool. I picked this up off a seller who was really eager to sell it. It came in this original case, which I'm so happy I found. This is the Game Boy Pocket. Let's take a look at it. Okay, it came in this nice crystal clear kind of design, and unlike the original Game Boy, which had 4 AA batteries, the Game Boy Pocket resorted to just only having 2. But they're AAAs, which even makes them more annoying because I hate those batteries. But I don't know about you, but the quality of the screen looks a lot more sharper. It still had the contrast roller on the side, but it just looks a lot sharper. I mean, I have no light shining this at all, and it still looks good. The only downside about this is the sound is not so good. I mean, that's the volume up high, and you can hear from it. That's as loud as it gets. There is a headphone jack as well too, and a DC input. The game pack insertion would go here. It would have the on-off, the expansion port, the volume, the contrast. It was just a miniaturized version of the Game Boy, but not as bulky. It was more small, more compact. Nintendo were trying to go for a slimline version. Of course, you know my feeling about slimline games, as you've seen my review of the Model 2 consoles. Sacrifices had to be made. So, you know, the speaker is not that good. They resorted to smaller, you know, less power consuming batteries, so you're still going to get back to basis of low power consumption. But it was a great little console. I loved it. Handheld. Stop calling it handheld. So, that is the Game Boy Pocket. You've already seen my review of the Game Boy Color box, but let's take a look at the unit itself. So check out my video if you want to see the original unboxing of this. I'm not going to get into it now. This is the Game Boy Color, which was my very first Game Boy. I will gladly admit that. Unlike the Game Boy Pocket, it went back to basis with 2 AA batteries. Simple batteries that we've all grown up with and we all know. This thing came in a variety of different colours. I have this kind of turquoise greenish kind of colour. I know it looks blue on camera, but that's because it's the light, but in reality it is green. You can tell from the box it's kind of green. So you can play your original Game Boy games, as well as its own variety of Game Boy Color games. Now, if you saw a game pack like this, you would instantly know. It would say Game Boy Color just there on the light. So if you tried to plug this into original Game Boy, would not work. This was only compatible for the Game Boy Color. Favorite Game Boy Color game, Wario Land 3. I've got other Game Boy Color games. I'm not going to get into my Game Boy, pack games, because I have really too many of these, and I could spend the better half of an hour talking about all my games. I just wanted to get my units out of the way and show you all my collections. So this is the Game Boy Color. Moving on, Game Boy Advance. Now this thing was amazing. For one, it introduces to a new style of gameplay. I mean, you grew up with this, then you grew up with this, your fingers are always there, then you still grew up with this. Little did we know that all we had to do was just kind of go, ooh, wait a minute, landscape, widescreen, shoulder buttons, yeah. This is the Game Boy Advance, and I personally love this thing. Not only was it backwards compatible like the Game Boy Color, you could play Game Boy original games, you could play Game Boy Color games, although they did kind of stick out a bit, but introducing the new thing, which was the Game Boy Advance games. Now this is personally my favourite, Super Mario Bros. 3. Goes in like the top, turn it on, and the introduction was even coolest enough. Look, has its own kind of 3D rotation, look. That's pretty cool. However, the big suffering that this went under was the fact it had no backlight. That was the thing that we all got familiar with all the Game Boys growing up. The Game Boy, Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, they had no backlight. Now, of course, there was adapters made for it, but it was just really annoying. We wanted something that we could see what we were doing. I mean, it was awkward enough trying to play the game without, trying to shine it on the light. Now, the Game Boy Advantage did have a more crisp, clear kind of contrast screen other than the Game Boy Color, as it was an Advantage piece of kit. But still, having no backlight really did cripple this system. The unit itself has two shoulder buttons on the top. It had the expansion port, game pack would go in here, the battery tray, which unfortunately I let fall, so the little clasp broke off, so a bit of duct tape there, but who knows. Had a headphone jack, it had the on-off switch, that's the volume. It didn't have any DC input, so if you ran low on juice, you could not just plug it into the wall, which made it good because they wanted to emphasize more portability. But growing up with things where you could plug into a wall, it was kind of a letdown, but sacrifices have to be. The Nintendo Game Boy Advance SP. Now, I've always wondered, what the hell does SP stand for? Advance Super Pocket. That's always a good name for it. The biggest innovation about this, other than it just being a Game Boy Advance in a different, kind of style, not only was it smaller and more compact, but it did have a rechargeable unit. So this thing had no batteries. You don't plug batteries into it. That's the battery pack in there. It was a non-lithium polymer rechargeable battery. And this is what the charge would look like. Of course, if you live in Europe, you have this. If you have UK, whatever. It was this thing here. Now, it was odd as hell, and trying to find third-party ones like this at the time was awkward. So it would go in like so, charge it in, and there you go. The biggest crippler of this thing, no headphone jack. Yeah, they just decide, no, the hell with it, no Game Boy, no headphone jack. Although there was an adapter made that would plug into the DC charge, and then it would have a 3.5mm headphone jack adapter at the end, so you could plug in headphones. The game would go in. So turn it on like so, and look, backlight off, backlight on. It wasn't the brightest backlight, but it meant that gamers could play it in the dark on a bus or whatever, and we would not have to worry about any kind of, oh, can't get the light. The speaker on it, I'll show you now. That's full volume. Very good speaker. It's right in your face when you're playing it, which is really good. It's a really, really good unit. I love this thing. Because of its huge successor, Nintendo brought out a few limited edition. There was a tribal one, they brought out universal colors. My personal favorite that I happen to own is this one here. This is the Game Boy Advance SP Nintendo version. Now, they both do the exact same thing. They're both the exact same unit. The only difference about them is that they have different themes. You look at the front here, I had the original grey box vents, if you're familiar with Nintendo. Had the official Nintendo seal up there. This has the traditional Nintendo kind of, I don't know, it has its own Nintendo colour. If you have a Nintendo at home, just take a look at it and try to figure out the colour of it. It had the original joystick kind of colours, the gamepad controllers, the red buttons, B and A. had the nice groove with the Nintendo brand up there. On the bottom I had the traditional black colouring. If you have a chance to get one, if you really are a Game Boy enthusiast, go out and buy one. Now, there was nothing special about this than there was about this, of course, they both do the same things. So, that was the Game Boy Advance SP, the original Nintendo DS. Now, when this hit our eyes, not only was it a big, huge improvement going from this to this, but you can kind of see where Nintendo brought their image from. They knew they had to keep with the portability of having a foldable screen. But instead of having just, the keypad and the screen, fuck it, let's put 2 screens on the damn thing. And utilise touchscreen innovation, which was the biggest seller of this thing. So let's take a look at the unit first, and then we'll talk about a few games and the hardware. So, had the same charger port of the Game Boy Advance SP, which is a big bonus. It had its own stylus on the side, so you could take out the stylus, and you would use it for the touchscreen. Most games were kind of gimmicky, we'd have to utilise the touchscreen on it, like, Wario Touched or whatever like that. But most of them were just hardcore, playable games. Like so. Here's where the game pack would go in, which would look like this. You got Super Mario Brothers for Nintendo DS. Take it out. The game pack would go in like so. Turn around like that. Pop in like that. Now, when I first saw this, I thought that's an SD card. That is an SD card, but it's not an SD card. Super Mario Brothers DS. This was pretty much my favorite Game Boy game ever for the DS. So let's do this. Mario Brothers. The graphics on it were something that we've never seen before, and the whole touchscreen thing was a really cool selling point. I mean, like, gamers have never seen this before in a game. I mean, you can imagine growing up with the original Mario and then seeing this on your doorstep was a really cool thing. Oh, you piece of shit. I'm gonna get the shell. Give me the shell. Give me the shell. That's my favorite thing. Shell! Yeah, I got the shell, bitch. I love this part, watch. You run. Yoo-hoo! But be careful, don't fall. Oh, shit, okay. Alright, that's enough of that. This thing had backwards capability as well, too. But only limited to Game Boy Advance games. So that would go in like so. You turn on your game again. Come on. And then down at the bottom it would say Start GBA Game. Start it. And then we switch to the one screen. So it was like playing your Game Boy Advance games. And there you go. Nintendo did think of it. But however, it was only limited to the Game Boy Advance games, which meant that Game Boy Color games would not fit, unfortunately. But they were trying to move forward and kind of get out with the old and in with the new, so you couldn't expect much from them. So that was the original Game Boy DS, Nintendo DS. I have to stop calling them Game Boy, Nintendo. Yeah, Nintendo DS. This is just the sleeve that I have it in. This is the Nintendo DS Lite in its lovely clam white shell. Feels amazing in the hands. It feels nice and comfortable. The buttons feel amazing. The shoulder pads have a nice click sound. It's compatible with the DS games, of course, as well as going back to basis of having the expansion port, so you could plug in your Game Boy Advance games. However, unlike the DS, the original one, which conveniently hid them when you put them in, this kind of one sticks out. So it's like going back to the Game Boy Advance where they kind of pop off. But, you can still play the damn things, so that's all that matters. It was the Nintendo DS Lite. It was a really cool thing. This was probably my favourite of the DS. Now, I just want to go on saying, I had the DS for quite some time. I have played it, I do love it. But eventually, I kind of lost interest of it. Just for a while. I wanted to go back to the basis of just my original Game Boy Advance and my original Game Boy Advance SP. But even then, I was kind of tired of just using the same Game Boy Advance all the time. I wanted something new. There had to be a Game Boy out there that I had never had. The Game Boy Micro. And this thing, I have to admit, is just gorgeous. Mint condition, boxed. I got the Super Mario Famicom 20th anniversary version. Japanese, if you want. So let's open this up. And of course, I have opened it up before. It's just a beautiful thing to have. The Game Boy Micro 20th anniversary edition. So let's pop it off. Now, of course, the manual is in, Chinese, so it's pointless me looking at it because I got it from a Chinese seller. So, yeah. It comes with a nice pouch sleeve to put it into it. Just a warranty, I assume, yeah. But the coolest thing by far is the charging method. a USB charger. That's how it charges. But cripply, it has its own adapter. Now you might be thinking, wait, that's a DS charger. That looks exactly like the DSi charger. No, it doesn't. It's 10 times bigger. Of course, you have the Mario Edition 20th anniversary. You know, this is where the power would go in. Your headphones would go in there. That's the on-off switch, the start select. The volume is on the side. The shoulder buttons, I thought when I played it was at the side there. Now you have to kind of damp it in like that. Here's how you'd hold it and play it. BA, left, right, up, down. It just feels so nice in the hands. But if you have tiny little hands, you will suffer. So let's take Mario Brothers 3 and pop it in and see what it looks like. Now, of course, as you know, your original Game Boy games probably won't work on it. Yeah, turn it on. And it had an LED backlit screen. So if you want to adjust the brightness, you can hold the L button and dim it like so. Like this. The speaker on this thing, that's as loud as it gets, which is pathetic, really. Okay, let's play Super Mario Bros. 3. This thing is just amazing. Like, look how crisp and clear the image is. This thing, when I bought this, I was just blown away as to how cute this thing is. It just feels really nice in the hands. You know, the graphics are amazing. The gameplay is stunning. It's Mario, for God's sake. What can you go wrong with Mario? This thing is just beautiful. Really is stunningly beautiful. I would show you what it looks like, except the battery's dead. Okay, it has an analog thumbstick which feels really nice in the hands, as well as going back to basics with the original D-pad. Has traditional XYBA buttons like you find on every DS, which feel really nice. The shoulder buttons make nice contact. The 3D screen is nice and clear, and the imagery is just stunning. Nintendo did a really fascinating job. Headphone jack positioning, I'm not a big fan of. I don't know why they put it dead center, because your fingers are naturally going to be hovering there, and your cable's going to be dragging down, so you're kind of trying to get out of the way and all that. The start, select, and home buttons feel like shit. I'm just being honest. They feel so cheap and tacky, as well as the volume rocker. I mean, it's just a little slider. It just feels really cheap and nasty. Nintendo kind of slapped it on. But that doesn't matter. You really don't give a shit, because you're too busy getting excited with the games to care about the cheapness of the volume and the start, select buttons. Has a camera on the front there, as well as 2 cameras to utilize the 3D imagery. You've got the stylus, which the positioning is just annoying, and it's a little micro stylus, but then you have to kind of stretch it out, and you get a full size stylus. So yeah, Nintendo kind of slapped on a few things which I'm not really happy about. Charging port as well, which is, you know, its own unique charging cable, which I have here. This thing here. Looks like that, kind of a weird little thing. If you want, you can plug it directly in to the 3DS and sit it on your room and charge. Oh, if you want to be cool, you never want to move your 3DS, you plug it into this charging bay that they give you, this dock, if you will. And then what would happen is, when this comes down, these 2 little needles come out, and they would penetrate this here, which would somehow give it power. I don't know how, but that would be charging like that, which is pretty cool. I've had a lot of experience with Game Boys. I love them to bits. I always will continue to love them. I'll still build up a collection. Hopefully I'll get my hands on a Game & Watch or a Game Boy Lite or a Game Boy XL. I haven't had a chance to get a hold of them, mainly because of finance reasons and, you know, just time consuming. But I'll get around to it and get one, and I'll let you know. So, this is a big shout out to fgv112.